This is a pre-meeting of the Mobile City Council, Tuesday, December 5th. We have approval of minutes from November 21st.
Any issue?
Appeals, we have request for waive of the noise ordinance on December 16th from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. And this is on Gulfdale Drive.
No problem.
Presentation of petitions and other communications to the council. Reverend Tony Allgood regarding police department and police brutality.
Just one? There are other things on the agenda that people can still sign up to.
Resolutions held over 08-1282. Approved purchase orders for fuel for the Wave Transit System. 08-1284. Approved purchase order to Intera for annual subscription renewal of Intera Operations Decision Support Software. 21-1285. Authorized contract with Red Pest Solutions for the Southeast for pest control. 21-1286. Authorized amendment to contract with Republic Parking System. Ordinance is being introduced.
Did you guys look at the parking thing that I talked about on Jackson Street?
Yes.
And
A lot of that has to do with events going around that area. Also, it's not only just the state, but the elections get to have those back placed on the meter so they can have their own events there.
you can own it where.
Cathedral Square.
But there's no events going on with the bags of that. That's what I was telling you about. Is the parking company doing this?
They're doing it at the request of it's they don't just do it on their own. It's because of events that have been scheduled and they've been requested to put on there, or they're being paid to put on.
So do they put them on the night before?
Yes,
the event?
because they don't want cars parking there as the event is starting to get set up.
Yeah, but, so you need to tell me so that nobody has to use those parking spaces the day before or the night before.
Right. We tried to have that. We tried to put that in place so that when the event takes place, there's not cars parked there that have to be move out of the area. Because if you don't, then you have cars parked there during the event.
I can understand the reason. It just seems 24 hours in advance is so hard to sell, or you put them on that way too early. People can't use the spaces that evening for dinner or
Right.
outing. So we're taking away from the general public for a whole 8 to 10 hours.
For Mardi Gras, no parking 2 hours before.
Joe's way to do it 12 hours before the event.
I'll-
Would be even too close, because a lot of times people want to be down there from 7 to 10 at night, so that's close. We need to find a little bit better way. I'm not, just a little bit better way to have to not take away from the limit.
Right, so I'll reevaluate and I'll talk Republic, see if they could. We'll rearrange. We'll see if we can make it better.
Well, let me just give you for instance.
Yes.
Last Sunday, the Wiz was at the Civic Center.
Mm-hmm.
There's no parking in the rear of the Civic Center. So let's just say that event happened on a Friday, then you're taking away from all the parking that we have to accommodate the Civic Center already, because there are red bags down there. So it creates another catastrophe, a small one, but it creates another, inconvenience to the general public. We're trying to utilize our downtown. And because we're going to have limited parking for a while, we need to, figure out how to do this so we can keep those parking spaces open. So if we can just find a softer way to do what we're doing to accommodate both parties as well.
Okay, will do.
Mr. Carroll, probably is something that y'all probably could think of, something like they do during Mardi Gras time. Like put up those signs like with the limited time, like 2 hours before, 2 hours during, 2 hours after.
That's a thought, but I mean, that would be with, that's Ms. White, right? That's Jennifer. That's you, okay.
Just food for thought.
Okay, that's fine, that's good.
Madam Clerk.
Ordinance is being introduced, 46059, ordinance amending Chapter 46, Police Department and Law Enforcement of the Mobile City Code.
Mr. Penn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Linder, can you explain this ordinance to everyone.
Thank you, Councilmember Penn. At your request, I drafted this ordinance, which is essentially attempting to codify what is current police department policy, but as citywide policy to make pre-dawn raids and no-knock raids against city policy unless they've been signed off on at a very high level in the police department and they certify and public safety, and that they certify that there is a health or safety reason for the no-knock raid or the pre-dawn raid, and that there's felony activity going on at the site. This would not apply to genuine emergencies where there's an immediate response or something of that nature. But again, anything that is planned in advance would have to go through this policy. And I think that's the nutshell version of it.
Thank you, Mr. Linder. I want to truly thank people before that came, like Pastor Lou. I want to thank Councilman Richardson. He's reached out to me earlier throughout this year for helping me coming up with ideas regarding this policy. Chief Barber stated before that under his guidance, he would not implement no knock. So I know that, of course, we all got to leave this earth one day, so he won't be here forever. So we need to put something in place. And so I believe that this ordinance will not only protect the citizens, but also protect the police officers. So hopefully with the support of this council, and hopefully I will have the support of this administration, we can pass this ordinance and move our city forward to make sure that we can protect our citizens, protect our police officers, and bring trust back, and bring unity into our city. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, I hope that Chief Barber retired before he leave this earth.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Barber?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. When I talked to Councilman Penn last week, I expressed concerns about an ordinance governing the search warrants. After I actually saw the ordinance, it's very much consistent with what my ideas are on how we should proceed. So you'll find no opposition. I look forward to working with all of y'all during the committee meeting to kind of change that language so it fits more of what the police department practice is. But I look forward to doing that today.
Anyone else?
Have committee today?
Well, we have the public safety committee with dealing with the body cam, so we can't
Yeah,
talk about it.
we do have that this afternoon, and the body cam portion of it hopefully will be fairly quick. So maybe we can go ahead and take this up if everybody's in agreement. Yeah. Okay.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Consent resolutions being introduced. 09-1288, transfer funds from District 2 General Fund discretionary account to Parks and Recreation General Fund account to assist with sponsoring community activities at the Robert Hope Center. 58-1289, 1290, and 1291 are declaring weeds noxious and assessing costs for removal of weeds, groups 1650, 1643, and 1645. 60-1292, approve award a special bonus to the Public Services Employee of the Month. 60-1293, 94, 95 are determine appropriations to Housing First, Inc., Country Club Estates Neighborhood Association, Inc., Twin Oaks Nursing Home, Inc., doing business as Twin Oaks Rehabilitation and Healthcare Center serves a public purpose and approving payment. 60-1313, request the Planning Commission consider a text amendment to Article 13 Spring Hill overlay of the UDC.
Vice President, you want to talk about this, or?
Councilman Daves and I are sponsoring this. This is simply to ask the Planning Commission to consider this. As you all are probably aware, the Village of Spring Hill has an overlay. It's a very confined area. And while the UDC requires certain amounts of acreage for these commercial developments west of I-65, none of the 4 commercial areas in this Village of Spring Hill overlay have 10 acres. So in effect, it's prohibiting commercial development. So what we are doing again is just asking the Planning Commission to take a look at it, make a recommendation one way or the other, and then it will come back to the council.
Has anyone looked to see, and I know it's your district, but did anyone look to see how it affects Sandtown?
Sandtown is within, a portion of Sandtown at least, is within the district in the commercial areas. They are, I believe, aware of it. So again, this is just removing from the 4 commercial areas, and Sandtown is only one area and it's already built up. So, you know.
Has anybody said anything to them yet?
Yeah, but this is just
This-
asking
this
the
is
planning,
just-
it's not
yeah,
doing
we-
anything.
we're
It's just
not
asking the
voting on
planning
anything, we're
commission to
not
look at it.
approving
You have to
anything
go
other
through the
than
planning commission and come back to us.
asking the Planning Commission to take a look at it. You know, there are no parcels within this small confined area that are 10 acres. So that in effect prohibits commercial development. So that's what we're asking for.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reynolds?
I've got a question for staff is, why is it 10 acres anyways? Shouldn't it be?
Question.
This is for, in order for a PUD, why is it 10 acres?
When the UDC was adopted last year, PUDs were eliminated. And the reason for eliminating them was they essentially require that if you have multiple buildings on a parcel or shared access, that required a site plan approval that would immediately have to go before the Planning Commission. We saw that as a barrier to redevelopment, the development community. Anytime that they modify existing PUDs, we're having to come back before the commission on very, very minor changes to make that request. So PUDs, as you know them, were eliminated. PDs are a separate development tool. Essentially, it's a zoning classification. We looked at how it impacted the Village of Spring Hill based on the community's question. And we see that it can create a constraint for development based on their very limited geography. So I just want to make sure we understand that a PUD and a PD are 2 different things.
I guess my question is more broadly, why is 10 acres the threshold for a PD? In order to do a PD, there must be 10 acres. Why couldn't it be, in order to do a PD, or what would be the downside of saying a PD requires 8 acres or 6 acres or
No acres.
no acres, whatever? I don't understand the concept.
The distinction east of 65, west of 65 was made with regard to the acreage, as you're dealing with more of an urban landscape. East of 65, west of 65, it's more of a suburban landscape. So as you're contemplating new development that may go in adjacent to existing residential areas, the density is a little different east of 65 versus west of 65. So we made that distinction with the acreage, understanding the differences in the pattern and development on one side of the city, the older part of the city versus a more newer development.
So would the idea be from a planning standpoint that if there's more, or population is more sparse, say west of 65, that it would be the goal from a planning standpoint to try to get one big development versus multiple small developments? Is that the aim?
I would
acreage?
alter your comment just by saying more of a suburban pattern. So you're trying to reinforce more of a suburban pattern in an already suburban area versus a more urban pattern in a more urban and more developed area. The Village of Spring Hill is an overlay, and we recognize the distinction in the size of parcels, how they're laid out, and then it is that community's desire to reinforce, and redevelop to fit more of a, I would say, closer to an urban development footprint in that area,
Be able to have mixed use within,
Yeah.
because it's more densely populated than some of the suburban areas.
Hold on, Ms. Carroll. Mr. Days, then you, Mr. Carroll.
Shayla, please don't take this as a criticism. I'm just trying to understand. Why is there a acreage requirement anyway?
If you look at planned developments just as a development tool and how they're used anywhere, you're going to see an acreage minimum.
Yeah, but why?
Once again, you wouldn't want to go into a more urban environment with a suburban development pattern. So you're acknowledging that you've got a smaller footprint to work in. So you're trying to encourage redevelopment in an urban footprint that mimics what's already there. So you're not trying to put suburbia in downtown or a downtown setting in more of a suburban landscape.
Under what conditions is a developer required to get a PD?
A PD is at the developer's own choosing.
Okay.
So
What does a PD do for the developer that he would choose to do that?
it allows the developer to essentially write their own zoning classification under PD. So the UDC makes every attempt to acknowledge every development type by introducing more of a form-based element to it. But we recognize that we're not going to be able to write code for every single development type. So PDs are used for what I would refer to as that more of the unicorn of a project that allows the developer the flexibility to write their own requirements. Now, because it's treated like a rezoning, the path for the approval is the same as it would be for a rezoning. So just like you would see before you on any agenda, a request to go for maybe B2 to B3 or B3 to B4, that request comes to you with a set of requirements that are already built into the ordinance that they must adhere to. The PD is unwritten. It outlines the type of development standards that have to be addressed, but it's unwritten. The Village of Spring Hill is a little different in that it has an overlay. So I would imagine moving forward with a PD, the developer would put forth the Village of Spring Hill standards, and that again would have to be voted on by the Planning Commission and the City Council.
I think I need to spend some time with you just because I still don't understand, but I don't want to take any more time this morning.
I want to take one more
Hold on, Mr. Reynolds.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Carroll.
Let him go.
Okay, Mr. Reynolds.
on a PD, but when a PD application is made, in that application, they actually describe all the uses and everything in the entire plan. And then that whole plan is considered. And they can't vary from that plan
Right.
without coming back to government and getting approval.
Once they've written their plan and you've blessed
That's
it,
it.
so to speak, it is their new district that they must adhere to.
Okay, that makes some more sense.
Carroll.
It was my understanding that within the PD or the PUD, the developer, after the plan was there, as long as it fit the form, could have an individual development within the plan that was smaller than the full 10 acres. Is that not the case?
I would still caution us in trying to mix PD and PUD.
I know,
But
I
so
mean,
ask your question again.
well, can they have a smaller development within the PD? They don't.
So the acreage requirement is just it's a minimum.
It's just a minimum.
So they can go below that if they,
Below that or larger?
no,
I mean, they can go below the acreage requirement.
correct.
That's correct.
Ms. Gregory.
Yeah, one thing too, talking about overlays, we have other overlays.
Wait a minute. I misunderstood.
Oh.
I thought in order to get a PD west of 65,
you have to have at least 10 acres.
Correct.
But that's not just,
You don't have to build. the
You have to
whole-
build
You
the
don't
10
have to build an
acres.
entire 10 acres.
Your
Lease.
site
You
must
have to
be
build the site.
10 acres.
Yeah, but, yeah.
That's what I'm. understanding. I didn't say-
Since we do have other overlays within the city, I would think that what we're talking about today could also impact them as far as any commercial development. Is it easier to make these work within overlays, so that you have confined spaces where certain things may be needed and other certain spaces where it's not, or have even a phased in approach throughout, the city, maybe areas further west or further, south, or more, or just different, and could, use different standards? I mean, if we're going to take another look at this, the full thing under the UDC, those are just some questions that, that may come
So
up.
we could. Now, I'll just remind you, this was specific to Village of Spring Hill,
Oh, yeah.
as we've committed
Right.
numerous times. We are looking at modifications to the UDC every day, all day. Just as a suggestion, if you'd like for us to study this for the Village of Spring Hill, and we're happy to sit down with whomsoever, I would recommend maybe that you move forward with this. But we're looking and evaluating all of our requirements across the city, and that's something that we could study. But also know that you have that in this instance, this community brought
Yeah.
this forward.
Yeah, this is a confined, small area that, they're looking to try and make some changes, and I would like to go ahead and move forward with this, but I think moving forward in a longer term,
Right.
if we can come back and take a look at this possibly as a citywide effort to see, what's out there, what's possible, what might work.
Mhm.
And again, going back to some of the other overlays that we do have in the city.
So it wouldn't be the full timeline, obviously, that the UDC took. But as a part of our effort, we sit down with those respective communities and try to understand, their preferences. So there's a little bit of a longer timeline to that. We're happy to take that on, but that's not an overnight.
One
decision.
last, go ahead. I asked this during the UDC conversations, but am I still to understand that developments west of 65, commercial have to be 10 acres? What happens if I can't afford the 10 acres and I can only afford a 5-acre development?
So then I'll take you back to the PUD
Uh-huh.
and why we removed it. No longer do you have to have any type of a development tool that allows you to develop a large site. That's just a matter of right. You're following the underlying zoning requirements with respect to use, with respect to site design. So all of the normal elements that you would typically look at are present, are there. So this doesn't inhibit a developer's ability to develop a site. All this is doing is allowing them the ability to write their own requirements. I mean, we're seeing developments out west that are moving forward that,
So it doesn't have to have 10 acres.
no,
I just wanted to hear you say that.
right.
Anyone else?
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Pam, sorry.
Yeah,
about that.
2 questions. What was the reason why in the west it needed 10 acres and the east didn't require it?
So it's a matter of density. It's a matter of scale. So essentially, I would say if you go west of 65, you see large tracts with subdivisions. You see large shopping centers, large malls, large commercial centers. When you're east of 65, they're more densely populated neighborhoods that were historically built, that have smaller homes on smaller lots, on smaller footprints. The commercial is generally scattered to support those neighborhoods. You don't see a large shopping center mall type in the older part of the city. And so we're just merely acknowledging the distinction because there's not a one size fits all approach with zoning. We're trying to mimic what's already there in our historic city, but also acknowledging opportunities for growth in the western part where there's a different development style that essentially, once the car was invented, everything was spread out. People weren't using bikes and walking as an amenity. It's dominated by the car downtown. And in our midtown neighborhood, it has a pedestrian feel, pedestrian fabric that we were simply trying to maintain with this PD requirement. We didn't want to make it so open-ended.
Okay. And then what would be the timeline to maybe, like you said, doing a citywide potential?
I wouldn't want to give you a timeline that I can't keep to. I've gone down that road before, but we need, it's a process. We need to understand the land use in that area. We need to calculate the density in that area. We need to understand the size of lots. And then they're sitting down at the table with the community and with our leadership to put a good plan forward. So I would say at a minimum, that's probably closer to a 6 to 9 months process.
Okay.
2 years.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Well, it could be, just depends on the size.
Mr. Dave?
Shayla, thank you for all this. And I want to thank you and your staff for all the labor you put into the UDC. It was a years-long process. There was a lot of sweat, blood, and tears associated with it. I know that. And I'm proud that we passed the UDC after all the trials we had with it. I think it's a great document. We knew when we did it, though, that we were going to, from time to time, we were going to have to come back and look at it and make some tweaks to it. And but that doesn't diminish the quality of the effort or the accomplishment. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that.
Madam Clerk?
CIP resolutions being introduced 09-1296, authorized payment for cost overrun for 2022 A-Trip 2 project, $432,530.66.
Mr. President.
Mr. Penn?
Yeah, Jennifer, can you explain this project? Yeah, Yes, sir.
Back in 2022, we accepted the A-Trip grant. It was $1.7 million in grant money. It's to be used on shielded routes. And so we're doing the 98, 43, 45 routes with this, it's a continuation of the RTOP money that we'd already spent previous years. We did, the agreement was no initial upfront match from the city, and that the city would just agree to any cost overruns. So the project has bid now, and the bids are back, and the low bid was like a little over 2.2 million. So that 432,000 is coming from the RTOP money that we've been dedicating. District 1 and 2 had every year for 4 years, this being the last year. So we're pulling that overrun from that pot of money to pay for the overruns. So it's a $2.2 million project over those 3 shielded routes to update and upgrade all of the traffic signals along it.
For those of us that don't speak in the vernacular of, all the acronyms, I live in the world, but some of us don't know what RTOP means. Some of us don't know what the
A-Trip
the
and-
A-Trip means. So there's a lot of new people here that
Yeah.
aren't. And so if you just.
I will.
tell me this.
I'll kind of. So RTOP is our Regional Transportation Operations Program that we're doing with ALDOT, the state. So through the course of the last few years, we've, and at some point in 24, all of the city's traffic signals will be brought into the Centrac software system so we can live look at them and control them. And we're in the process now of dividing up the city, both city streets and state routes, to have a consultant actually review them every day and keep us up with faults and stuff like that so that we can go and make repairs. The biggest benefit to it is going to be when we have an incident, and incident management will be able to live flush a system. We currently have been using it for the last year, 2 years for Mardi Gras. We've been actively controlling the signals around downtown to flush the city streets, both before getting people into downtown and after getting them back out of downtown. So this is just a larger scale of what we've been doing locally. A-TRIP is a yearly grant application through AlDOT. It can only be used on state shielded routes, but the cities have to apply for the money. So the city applied for that grant to kind of pick up where the RTOP money ran out and do some additional work on those streets that we had already been working on, that 98, 43, 45. So we anticipate, like I said, we anticipate by the end of the 24 that all of the, except for maybe a few outlying signals, all the signals will be in Centrax, and we'll have live control over them.
The cost is the fiber, really is getting fiber.
Yeah, well, a lot of these we're doing cell modem and stuff like that, and luckily for us, the AlDOT is paying the monthly charges for us. But we're coming back. A lot of this we're looking at while we're doing this initial. We're looking at bigger issues with the signals that may need to down the road. One of them will be probably running fiber so that we get off of that monthly bill cell thing. In the city projects along the city streets, we've been running a lot of fiber because it doesn't just benefit us, it benefits all the rest of the city when we run that fiber, connecting to some of the fire stations and police stations and parks in the outlying area. So like when we've done Cottage Hill Road through the District 6 and we've been running some of that fiber, we're using some dark fiber from Unity that the city has through a lease program that'll, through our, where they have to allow us so much dark fiber every time they run fiber. But we've been also taking advantage and running connections to like Cottage Hill Park and things like that while we're doing these projects for the traffic signals. We're also running little runs to other city facilities for them. So it's over the next probably 5 years, we'll extend that network fiber, but we're getting pretty good results out of the cell modems in the meantime. It's getting us places quicker because the cell was the bigger issue, the bigger issue and the bigger cost to the project.
Mr. Davis, and then Mr. Woods.
Jennifer, give me an update on where we are on the Dolphin Street from Sage Avenue to Rhymes Road.
We are getting ready to bid that project. We're waiting on our engineer is waiting on some comments from our detection on if we're having them evaluate what we're using for a detection to make sure our detection zones work. So we're waiting on the manufacturer to return some information on our detection for that. But I would anticipate this winter that we're under construction out there.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. One, just because I'm a nerd about this, and then two, just because I do have a question. Whenever we go to the camera system on all the traffic lights and the control, that'll include the loop systems too. So you'll have a view on all the loops that are out there.
Yeah, because what we're really seeing is the controller, and so
Okay.
we're looking at. We see it's like when you pull it up, it's like it gives you a video image. It's not real video. It's like an AI image of the controller and what's going on in it. So we get to see
the controller that way.
Yeah, what's doing it. Now we're also installing with these projects pan, tilt, zoom cameras. So we are looking at the corridor that way and we can see, but we're not looking at our individual detection cameras. We're looking at the corridor cameras more than anything. So, but we see those loops operating. It'll tell us whether they're operating or not.
Okay. And then the last question was the Greenlight Road project. Where do we stand on that, I guess?
We are in the process. The consultant's doing the timing for us right now, and we're ordering all of the material. We've actually finished the District 4 one and the District 6. We're picking that one, finishing up the original one, and then we're taking up the annexed areas next.
And Mr. Penn, did you have some?
No.
Vice President?
Well, Jennifer, since you're here and you just brought up the annexed areas, sorry. But, and I had a meeting last night and I had some of the newly annexed residents there. So just the survey on the lighting, the street lights, where are we on that? And being able to, number one, take over some of those power bills, but on the other side of it too, where there are no street lights. I know that's a bigger project, but can you just give us a status?
We have finished the survey with Alabama Power on one where new street lights need to go and what's existing. And so Alabama Power will have to order all of them though, those lights. and do the install, but we have finished that and started working with them on that so that those can get installed.
Oh, good. Well, that's great. That's great news. As far as taking over the bills,
We have taken over several
are we taking over several?
neighborhoods that have done their part and have worked with Alabama Power. We have signed off and taken off maybe about 4 or 5 different neighborhoods so far.
So we're still working on that.
We're still working with the neighborhoods on that.
All right.
Someone
Thanks.
else. Thank you, Ms. White. Madam Clerk.
Resolution's been introduced, 08-1297, approved purchase orders for fuel for various city departments. 08-1298, approved purchase order to Cities Co. Boatler Company for heated banquet plate carts for the convention center, $73,392. 08-1299, approved purchase order to Donahue Chevrolet for 13 Chevrolet Tahoes, $674,797.76. 1300, authorized change order number 1 with Moffitt and Nickel to complete CE&I and grant closeout of the 3 Mile Creek dredging project, $62,311. 211301, authorized second and third years of third-year contract for Convergent Technologies for server and security camera maintenance at the cruise terminal, $31,488 per year for 2 years. 211302, authorized contract Found Design LLC for merger for directional sign design and placement project, $143,660. 601303 and 1304 are authorized in settlement agreement and release of claims. Call for public hearings. 411305, call for public hearing to consider modification of a previously approved PUD located at 951 Downtown and Boulevard and 3655 Marion Beckham Drive, scheduled January 2nd. 411306, call for public hearing to consider modification of approved planning approval for property located at 951 Downtown and Boulevard and 3655 Marion Beckham Drive, scheduled January 2nd. 411307, 1308, 1309, 1310, 1311, and 1312, calling for public hearings to rezone newly annexed areas in Orchard Estates and the Cottage Hill corridor from R1 to R3, from in Kings Branch and the Cottage Hill corridor from R1 to B1, Kings Branch and Cottage Hill corridor from R1 to LB2, Cottage Hill corridor from R1 and B2, R1 to B2, Kings Branch, Orchard Estates, and the Cottage Hill corridor from R1 to B3, and Orchard Estates and the Cottage Hill corridor from R1 to CW, all scheduled January 2nd. Announcements.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reynolds.
this is not really, I don't, what is CW? Zoning classification.
Commercial warehouse. So basically, whatever we had a warehouse that was already existing and met the standard for that designation, we carried that forward in the annexed area. So it's essentially, as we're seeing a lot of distribution activity, these are the smaller warehouses that are being used to store product. It's outside of the industrial areas.
It's already defined in the UDC CW zoning classification.
Yes.
You guys had somebody ride out there looking at all of this stuff.
Yes, we did a land use survey prior to any of this work, right after the annexation vote took place.
How intense was it? Was it just windshield or was it?
It was windshield, but all of our GIS technology and other support we used makes that process a lot easier than it used to be.
Mr. Woods.
And just for all the folks that watch us every week on YouTube, there, in the meantime, between now and whenever it finally comes before us to vote on it, in order to keep business going and get your licenses and everything, they can come to you with proof that, an R1, because everything's R1 right now,
Right.
and seek a conditional use permit. Just something that wanted to point out because we talked about this week. So
Yes, sir. We didn't want to stop any development activity. This work needed to happen. So those that could not align with the timeline are coming before us now with their requests for rezoning in the annexed area. And those are being forwarded to you all for consideration. I think we've had a couple already. Yes, like they normally would.
Vice President.
Yeah, and Shayla, if anybody's looking at the agenda and think it's a little confusing, once you explained it, it's not confusing because when we did the annexation, everything reverted to R1, residential, single family. So that's why we're seeing specific parcels going from R1 to these different designations. Because I was thinking that we just get one map and say, here it is, do it. But this really breaks it down a lot better for the people who were concerned about their property so that they can make sense of it.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
and Mr. President,
Woods.
and then just kind of bring everybody up to speed, because I don't think y'all council's ever done this before, really, outside of small annexations. We did have several, as far as planning commission, several folks came, added comment, sought changes to their zoning. So this is factoring in some of the folks that came out and talked and asked for a change. So I heard from folks, and again, this is just another way to hear for folks one more time. So.
I think Ms. Gregory and Mr. Carroll have been through this before. Yeah.
Not to this
Yeah. Theodore. Yeah, Theodore.
Yeah, Theodore was.
Yeah.
But this is so two areas of the city that's.
Anyone else from this council? Anything from administration? Okay. We'll see each other at 10:30.
From Railroad, Railroad?
Never seen that.